My spouse betrayed me with my long-estranged sibling. She concealed the child for 7 months, then attempted to sue me for $1,800 monthly in child support. I hadn't spoken to my sister in nearly a decade when my wife invited her over for a meal. I returned from work to find her there, Lydia, seated at my dining table, chuckling with my wife like they were old friends. My stomach knotted the instant I saw her. She hadn't changed much. Same sly grin, same cutting wit, same false warmth that deceived everyone but me. I stayed silent. I didn't want to stir trouble. My wife, Sarah, gestured me over with a warm smile, as if all was well. "Guess who I bumped into at the library?" she said cheerfully. We started chatting, and I thought, why not mend things? Mend things? With the woman who got me thrown out of our family home at 17? Lydia was always the favored one, untouchable. I was the troublemaker. The one with the bad attitude. The one who never valued what he had. She stole from our parents, lied about it, pinned it on me, and they believed her. Every single time. When I finally walked away, I vowed I was done. No contact. No visits. Nothing. For almost 10 years, I kept that vow. Then, without consulting me, my wife reopened a door I'd sealed shut. I pulled her aside after dinner, keeping my tone steady. "Why would you do this?" "She seemed nice," Sarah replied with a shrug. "I didn't realize it was that big a deal." That big a deal? I was nearly homeless because of Lydia. I juggled 2 jobs to finish high school. Now she was drinking coffee in my home like none of it happened. But Sarah pressed on. "Maybe she's different now. Maybe you both are." Trauma does that. It makes you question your own recollection. Makes you wonder if you were the problem. And when the person you trust most, the one who knows you best, urges you to try, you start to think they might be right. So I tried. I gave her a chance. Lydia started visiting more often. Always with small gifts. Always complimenting Sarah's cooking. They grew close quickly. Too quickly. I'd come home to find them deep in conversation on the sofa, wine glasses in hand, like lifelong confidants. At first, I was uneasy. Then I grew suspicious. I noticed things. Hushed talks that stopped when I entered. A shift in Sarah's behavior, cooler, more judgmental. And Lydia? She seemed too at ease, like she was claiming territory. Still, I held my tongue. I didn't want to be that husband, the distrustful, paranoid one. They were sisters-in-law, weren't they? Maybe this was good. Maybe they were mending what I couldn't. Then one night, I came home late from a work function. The house was dark. Sarah left a note on the counter, out for a walk with Lydia. Back soon. It was nearly midnight. Something in me broke. I waited. 1 hour. 2. I texted her. "Where are you?" No reply. They returned around 2 a.m., laughing like schoolgirls. I pretended to sleep, but I overheard them whispering in the kitchen. I heard my name. The next morning, Sarah acted normal, kissed my cheek, brewed coffee. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Until the picture. 3 days later, I was rummaging for batteries in a drawer when I found it. A small photo hidden among manuals and receipts. A newborn's picture. Not just any newborn. Wrapped in a hospital blanket, time-stamped 7 months ago. I stared at the date. Did the math. 7 months ago, Sarah said she was staying at her mother's for a week. Said she needed a break. Said I'd been too stressed. I never questioned her. I never thought to. Until now. At first, I told myself it couldn't be hers. Maybe Lydia had a kid. Maybe it was someone else's photo. But the more I studied that baby's face, the more I saw it. He looked like me. Same nose. Same jawline. That faint birthmark near his left eye? I have the same one. The date on the back aligned perfectly with the week Sarah vanished to clear her mind. My hands shook. I waited until Sarah returned. That's when it all unraveled. The sudden distance. The late-night walks. The phone turned face down. Lydia moving nearby, by chance. I'd been played, methodically, cruelly. Betrayed not just by my wife, but by my own sister. They'd orchestrated this. The next morning, I called my attorney. I didn't confront Lydia. I didn't give Sarah another chance to explain. There was nothing to say. I filed for divorce, moved in with a friend temporarily, and began untangling our finances. That's when the backlash hit. Sarah texted me constantly. "Can we talk? I messed up. He doesn't mean anything." Funny, he meant enough to have his child. Lydia stayed quiet. Until she didn't. A week later, my mother called. "Why are you doing this to your sister?" she demanded before I could speak. It hit me then. They knew. They all knew. "She's your family," my mother said. "You're acting like she committed a crime." "No," I said. "She just ruined my marriage." "She made a mistake," she snapped. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be. That baby has no father now, and you're playing the victim." I couldn't believe it. My mother, who barely acknowledged me growing up, who dismissed Lydia's lies and called me too emotional, was now painting me as the bad guy. For refusing to raise my sister's child with my soon-to-be ex-wife. I hung up. I blocked them all. But the guilt came anyway. Sarah's family reached out next. Her aunt called, saying I needed to step up and at least pay child support. For Lydia's kid. I asked. "No," she said, like I was dense. "For your wife's." I laughed. She wasn't my wife anymore. And she wasn't acting like one when she was with my sister behind my back. The next week, I got served papers. Sarah filed for partial spousal support. Lydia had moved in with her. Both were jobless. And somehow, I was supposed to fund their lives. All because I'd worked hard, stayed disciplined, and built a stable life. That's when I decided I wasn't just walking away. I was fighting. If they wanted a battle, I'd give them one. I wasn't wealthy, but I was secure. Salaried. Careful with money. And thankfully, I kept records of everything. That's what saved me. I hired a new attorney, one who didn't want to settle quietly. One who saw what I saw, a calculated scam disguised as a sob story. I gave her everything. Sarah's bank records, my call logs, text screenshots, the baby photo. I listed mutual friends, old neighbors, colleagues, anyone who might have seen their scheme. She didn't flinch. "This," she said, flipping through Lydia's flimsy affidavit, "is a hustle. Let's treat it like one." It was the first relief I'd felt in weeks. I started digging deeper. I reached out to an old friend, Tara, who knew both me and Sarah from early in our marriage. We drifted apart, but when I explained, she didn't hesitate. "Oh my God," she said. "She lied to you." I knew something was wrong when Lydia started showing up everywhere with her. They were inseparable, practically overnight. I asked Sarah about it, and she dodged me. "Would you give a statement?" She agreed instantly. So did two co-workers who saw me unravel at work after finding the photo. I hadn't shared details, but my demeanor said enough. My attorney compiled it all. Witness accounts, financial records, timelines, woven into a sharp, undeniable story. Meanwhile, Sarah was on social media, portraying me as the bitter ex who abandoned her while pregnant. She never mentioned whose child it was. Her posts gained traction. Sympathy. Messages from men offering to support her. She played the victim perfectly. Until I made my move. I didn't post anything, I didn't write a tell-all. I just shared the photo. That photo. The one of the baby, with the date clearly written on the back. I sent it to one person, a former mutual friend who ran a local gossip blog. I said nothing. Just attached the image with the subject. She said it was mine. Within a day, the blog posted a vague but damning piece about a local couple and a sibling betrayal. No names were used. But those who knew us knew. And just like that, Sarah's comment section shifted. No more pity. Just questions. Doubt. People asking, is it true? Sarah deactivated her account 2 days later. Lydia, ever the schemer, tried to take charge next. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, standing in the hall with a soft voice and a baby wrapped in a blanket. "I thought you might want to meet him," she said. I didn't open the door, just spoke through the peephole. "Tell your sister she chose the wrong partner in crime." The baby fussed. Lydia sniffled. I closed the door. The court date arrived 3 weeks later. Sarah looked exhausted. Lydia didn't show. Maybe she knew better. My attorney tore their case apart. No evidence of abuse. No shared finances for months before the split. No basis for spousal support, especially since Sarah quit her job voluntarily before I left. When we showed the baby's birth timeline against the week Sarah went to her mom's, the judge raised an eyebrow. When Tara testified about seeing Sarah and Lydia acting like more than friends during the pregnancy, the judge reviewed the statements twice. And when I submitted the photo, with timestamp metadata and hospital details intact, it was done. The judge didn't just dismiss the claim for support. He issued a statement noting concerns of collusion between Sarah and Lydia to extort money under false pretenses. It wasn't enough for criminal charges, but it was enough to block future claims. For the first time since the betrayal, I saw Sarah break. She cried. Not out of remorse. Because her plan failed. 3 days after the hearing, my father texted, "We need to talk." I hadn't heard from him in 6 years. Not since I refused to bail Lydia out of a DUI she got in college. One my parents tried to hush up with money. They called me selfish then. Said I didn't understand family. That was the last time I cared about their opinion. Now suddenly, he wanted to talk. I didn't respond. The next morning, my mother called from a blocked number. "You've made this worse than it needed to be," she said icily. I nearly laughed. Worse? As if I'd orchestrated this chaos. As if I'd crossed lines they called family. "Lydia's heartbroken," she went on. "You're her brother." "No," I said, my voice firm. "I was her target." She hung up. That night, I found a letter taped to my door. From Lydia. Handwritten, messy, rushed. Apologies laced with excuses. She claimed she missed our childhood connection, however faint it was. That Sarah had manipulated her too. That she didn't mean for things to go this far. She ended with one line. "He still needs an uncle." I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that sentence. The nerve of it. The way these people used blood, guilt, and memory like leverage. Thinking I'd eventually buckle. And part of me almost did. But betrayal doesn't just shatter trust. It erases the path back to who you were. The next day, I drove to my parents' house. The same one I'd left as a teen, dragging a duffel bag while Lydia shed crocodile tears on the porch. I didn't tell them I was coming. I wanted to catch them off guard. They answered the door together. My father, arms folded, my mother with that fake smile she wore for guests. "Why are you here?" she asked. I held up the letter. "This stops now." My mother looked puzzled. My father looked irritated. "You think cutting us off makes you better than us?" he snapped. "You think your job makes you above family?" "I think surviving you makes me free," I said. "And I won't let you sneak back into my life just because your plan failed." "You're being immature," my mother hissed. "No," I said. "I'm finally being an adult. One who doesn't accept abuse dressed up as duty." Then Lydia appeared, coming down the stairs. Hair disheveled, eyes weary, baby on her hip. Her expression softened when She saw me. "You came," she whispered. I looked at her. Truly looked at her. And for the first time, I saw her clearly. Not as the cunning sister who always won, but as a frightened girl who grew into a woman who didn't know how to love without breaking people. Thanks for reading this intense family saga with me. If you're hooked on Reddit-style family drama, be sure to subscribe and hit notifications so you don't miss the next one. My husband stranded me in an Italian village after an argument, thinking I'd crawl back. But I didn't. Now he's the one searching for me. Let's see how she manages, Ethan laughs, slamming the car door in the evening air. The taillights of our rental car faded as they turned down the narrow Italian street, leaving only dust and his friend's laughter. I stood frozen, mid-sentence. Our fight outside the small cafe seemed trivial now, dwarfed by his unthinkable act. "He'll come back," I whispered, drawing stares from diners at nearby tables. "This is just to scare me." But as minutes turned to hours, dread settled in. Night fell over the unfamiliar town whose name I couldn't pronounce. I never imagined Ethan drinking so much at lunch when I begged him to stop. His college friends, here for their annual reunion, I reluctantly joined, egged him on. When I suggested heading back to the hotel, Mark sneered, "She's always controlling you, man," ordering another round. Ethan followed me out, his words slurred but his anger sharp. Years of buried resentment exploded, making the fight vicious. Your purse has your passport, right? He spat before getting behind the wheel. You'll figure it out. You're so smart, always telling me what to do. Full darkness fell, and reality hit. Suddenly, the charming Italian village felt menacing. Counted my cash, €80, $37. Not enough for a flight home or a hotel. Ethan had my credit cards in his wallet. When my purse was full, he'd offered to carry them. I found a cheap guest house above a bakery, with a tiny bed and a corner sink. The elderly owner, who spoke no English, patted my arm kindly as she showed me the room. He blocked me, I gasped, checking my phone. 27 calls to Ethan went to voicemail. Texts went unanswered. I tried Mark, Daniel, all his friends in the car. All blocked. I realized this was a planned humiliation. Sleep came in fits, broken by hopeful phone checks and panic. By morning, I thought the nightmare would end. Ethan would apologize, say I overreacted to his prank. I'd be mad but relieved to return to our polished life in Boston, where he was a respected architect and I was his supportive wife, who'd quit her design career to manage our home and social life. He didn't come. On day 2, I stretched my money, buying only a sandwich while searching the town for our tour group. By night, I learned they'd left for Florence without me. On day 3, a kind cafe owner noticed me lingering outside and gave me free espresso and broken English directions to the police station. The officer seemed unfazed, as if abandoned tourists were routine, but his limited English and my non-existent Italian left me with a filed report and a nod. That afternoon, I made the hardest choice of my life. At a crowded pawn shop, I removed my wedding ring, the 2-carat diamond Ethan upgraded on our 5th anniversary, replacing our simple band. The shopkeeper offered far less than its value, but enough for my next move. America, call family, the pawnbroker said, handing me euros. I nodded, but a new plan was forming. Family meant explaining, hearing my mother's "I told you so" about Ethan's temper, and facing friends who saw the cracks in our marriage I'd hidden. At the bus station, the departure board listed places from travel magazines. An overnight bus to Rome connected to ferries and buses to places Ethan and his friends wouldn't think to look. My finger hovered over my father's name in my contacts. One call, and he'd send money for a flight home. One call would pull me back to a life of shrinking to fit Ethan's ego. Ethan used to joke about hiding my design portfolios when I considered returning to work. Why complicate things, he'd say. We don't need the money, and I need you focused on us. I laughed it off then, but in that grimy station, I saw it as another wall in his cage around me. Where to? The ticket agent asked, an older woman with kind eyes who'd watched me stare at the board for 20 minutes. Greece, I said, the choice crystallizing. The farthest coastal village you can get me to. 14 hours later, I stepped off the final bus, aching from cramped seats and stress. A village with a name I couldn't say, whitewashed houses, and the scent of salt and olives. My phone died somewhere between countries. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, and the weight of my choices pressed down. Exhaustion blurred my vision as I walked toward the town center. 3 days of emotional chaos left me raw, swinging between fury at Ethan, fear of the unknown, and a strange, unexpected spark of freedom. I could afford 2 nights in the cheapest room with my remaining euros. After that, I had no plan, no friends, no local words beyond please and thank you. But watching the Aegean waves turn gold and pink at sunset, I felt peace for the first time in years. Ethan meant to teach me dependence. Instead, he set me free. As I left the village, the Greek sun scorched my feet in flimsy sandals. Dehydration, hunger, and exhaustion spun my world after my water ran out hours earlier. Silver-green trees lined the dusty road, their leaves glinting like coins. I glimpsed olive groves before my knees gave out. I barely felt the ground hit my face. A strange calm washed over me as darkness crept in. Maybe this was fitting. Abandoned by my husband in one country, collapsing alone in another. I closed my eyes, too tired to